At the time, though, the market was no way. They hire these experts, and it costs a lot of money for a reason. We're never going to do self-service discovery. That's a terrible idea. It's an expert thing. And we said, well, we'll see about that.
Today on LawNext, we talk with Andy Wilson, co-founder and CEO of Logikcull, a company that describes itself as offering a fundamentally new way to do discovery. This is Bob Ambrogi, and you're listening to LawNext, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. We'll get to today's interview in just a moment. But first, let's hear from the sponsors who generously support LawNext. And now, on to this week's interview. Andy Wilson, welcome to LawNext.
Thanks, Bob. Happy to be here.
Good to have you. And I should say that we are actually here in your very nice offices in San Francisco. Thanks for hosting us here. And we even have a studio audience, so if you hear cheers or guffaws in the background, that would explain that. It's funny because in preparing for this interview, I was remembering, I think the first time I met you, which was at Legal Tech in New York, and it might well have been the first year you came out with your product.
2013, yeah, 2013.
2013, and I remember I kind of walked over to I think you kind of called me over to your booth or something, and I was standing at your booth, and you kept talking about just how simple it was and how easy it was to use. I
was wearing a pink T-shirt.
You might well have been wearing that. I don't remember.
We had to stick out.
You have had good T-shirts over the years. That I do remember. But 2018, you've described this past year as really a kind of a momentous one for this company. You brought in a $25 million Series B round, I think, right? Series B, and then you've from what I've read, you've seen phenomenal growth in your customer base.
Yeah.
You received. G2 Crowd gave you a top e-discovery platform rating, I think. What's going on? What do you account for what the development and the growth that you've been seeing over the last couple of years?
I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, but at a super high level, I would say the market is now ready for cloud-based discovery. And it wasn't when we launched in 2013, that's for sure. When we launched the product then, a lot of people told us it was a really bad idea for them to store highly sensitive information for discovery purposes in the cloud.
Yeah.
We're like, well, what's your alternative?
Right.
And you describe the alternatives, and you're like, you really think that's a better idea? So I think the market is just pulling us in this direction now. The investment that we took on last year, one of the big reasons why we did that is we wanted to triple the engineering team so that we could figure out other ways to unlock more of this market, by lowering our cost internally so that we can figure out ways to pass that savings on to the market, which should further increase demand in the service.
Yeah, there was at least one article about your taking that investment that had the headline was something like they just took $25 million, but founder says they didn't need it, or something like that.
That's right. Yeah.
Is that fair to say? Was that an accurate headline? The article didn't go into a lot of detail on why it said that. But.
Yeah. Well, so we definitely didn't need it. We had a strong balance sheet, growing very quickly. Last year. We added over 700 new customers. The year before that, it was around 600. And the year before that, we only had 100 customers. So we've more than 10x'd our customer base in 2 years. And the product isn't free. So our customers are paying us to use it. So we had recurring revenue coming in, growing very quickly. I was a former bootstrap founder back in 2004 when I launched the first version of the company, right, which we can go into later if you want. Yeah. So we know how to stretch a dollar. Yeah. We're not spinning like drunk sailors over here.
Yeah. Well, I did want to ask you about that. I mean, the original company was a services company, not a product or technology company. Yeah. You were doing what, data collection services, or?
No, it was data processing services. Processing. Yeah. So we backing up a little bit. To 2001. So I graduated from Virginia Tech with it's called management science. It's basically a combination of computer science and business class, because I was a mediocre computer engineer, so I went to business school. But I ended up mashing these things together. But when we graduated at that time, the dot-com bust had happened. There was no tech jobs. I had a job with Arthur Andersen, if you remember those guys. They're still around technically. Yeah. But that job went up in smoke along with all the documents they were burning for Enron. Yeah. It's funny how Enron plays a huge story in the e-discovery space and has impacted my life greatly. Right.
So that's still the default, the sort of data collection that everybody plays with, right?
Yeah. We've made our own to make it a little spicier, because who wants to read Ken Lay's emails again? It's kind of depressing. Yeah. So anyway, I fell into this space because a friend of mine from college was working at his brother's company, and they were printing all this data out to paper at the time. Still, people do this stuff. A lot of lawyers love paper. Yeah. Unfortunately.
So I've heard.
Yeah. So, and I tell this to people that say, you're not a lawyer. Why would you start a legal tech company? And pretty sure very few people, if any, actually wake up and say, I'm going to be a legal tech founder. Right. But the legal industry is one where once you look at it, and if you have any entrepreneurial bone in your body, you can't look away. Yeah. It's just total rubbernecking, because you're like, whoa, that shouldn't be that way. There's a better way of doing this. And the market is underserved from a technology standpoint for a long time. That's changing now. A lot of investments happening. So I just fell in love with it. I'm like, okay, there's a lot of problems here to solve. And this problem of discovery, which was super interesting to me because it's large amounts of data, requiring a lot of computing power, made me realize, okay, we should do a better job at this. So the first version of the company was people would ship us hard drives, because we left that printing company. We're like, that doesn't make any sense. Let's not print emails to paper anymore. And people would ship us hard drives, and we would process it and then ship it back. And we'd charge millions of dollars for that.
And then you figured out at some point that there should be a technology approach to doing what you were doing? Is that how you went from one to the other?
Yeah, at the time...
Actually, and they both kind of lived simultaneously for a while, right? I mean, after you had started to develop the technology product, you were still doing the services for a while.
Yes. Well. So from 2004 to 2009, we wrote software. It was modeled off of Hadoop, if you're familiar with that. It's what Google originally... Hadoop is an open source thing that's modeled off of Google's Big Table, which is their original way of indexing the web and doing large scale compute. But it had no interface. People would ship us data, we would process it, and then we would just ship it back. It's organized data. The value prop is really simple. It's like, hey, before you print, let us digitize it for you first. Right. Then you can print all day long, but at least you have a record that you can go back to. So we did that from 04 to 09 and made a name for ourselves as this company that could process large amounts of data very quickly and affordably. Even though we were charging outrageous amounts of money, there was other people charging even more money than that. Yeah. So we're very very competitive in the market. But what happened is in the recession, our business slowed down a little bit, not that much, because law firms for the most part are kind of recession immune, depending on the type of practice you do. But
and some do quite well in recessions.
Oh, absolutely, bankruptcy lawyers. Yeah, I mean, in good times and bad, lawyers are making money. Yeah, it's kind of a great market to be in, honestly. Right. Depending if you're selling to the right customer. So it slowed down enough where we got a chance to think, what does the future really look like for this business? And it didn't look great. And we were asking questions like, does this thing scale? Is this really the future? Are people going to continue to ship hard drives to a service provider to process it? Yeah. And we came to the conclusion that no way. Like, the cloud is here. The cloud's a perfect fit for this problem. Let's build a service that automates us out of the process.
Yeah. So was that what motivated you to start building the cloud platform? I mean, did you feel that there was a bigger problem there that wasn't being addressed by other technology that was available at that time, and that you set out to address? And what was that?
Yeah, I think the vision that we have now is very different than what we started with. I'd be lying if I told you like, oh yeah, we set out to democratize this process from the beginning, and we realized all this underserved market and these amazing stories that would happen. That's not the case. Like, we were really just solving our own problem of existence. We realized if we didn't do this, somebody else is going to do this, and our business is going to be disrupted. So why why don't we be the ones to actually disrupt it?
Yeah.
So it was a little mini innovator's dilemma, if you're familiar with that,
Yeah.
that book by Clay Christensen.
Yeah, sure.
And it took a lot of courage, to go from a services business to a software as a service business. It took 4 years,
Yeah.
and we were bootstrapped, and there was a lot of near-death experiences there, where we were almost running out of money,
right?
Because we didn't
get the credit card out.
Oh yeah, I mean it was scary. We at one point we had 3 months of cash left in the bank, and we needed work to continue funding the operation, and it was still dicey times, with post-recession, and nobody would give us any money. So we lucked out. We ended up getting all of the mortgage documents for the Bank of America countrywide crisis, that was going on, and they paid us $250,000 to process all that data.
Yeah,
and that ended up funding us for another 10 or so months.
Yeah.
It was crazy times.
Yeah. And was the hardest part then still this idea of just trying to sell people on the cloud?
Oh man, and I mean, we were pretty convinced, like, this is the future. Like, this is not going away. This makes all the sense in the world. Why should a human handle this very digital service? Doesn't make sense to us. The internet is all about convenience. So if this service can be put online and be more convenient and more affordable, why not, right? Why not us? So at the time, though, the market was no way. They hire these experts, and it costs a lot of money for a reason. We're never going to do self-service discovery. That's a terrible idea. It's an expert thing. And we said, well, we'll see about that. Like, software is going to do a better job for the vast majority of the cases out there. It turns out almost 100% of them, actually. Yeah. Eventually, maybe it'll get to 100%, but it's pretty close.
Yeah. So when did it really start to turn around for you? When did you start to see when were you pretty confident that you were no longer in those days of struggling for the next customer?
Oh man. 2013 was a rough year because we were still operating the services business to fund the software business.
Yeah.
We didn't have,
that was the year you launched the software business.
Yeah.
Right? So that was,
So we're still using the services business to bring in revenue to fund operations for the software side.
Yeah.
And the market, I mean, we got some traction there, but it was not there. And then 2014, it started to pick up. We started to get some, more interesting customers across not just law firms, but businesses and some government customers. 2015 is really when it started to take off. And that's when we decided, okay, the market's somewhat ready. Let's go out and raise a round of funding. So we did that, raised a small, now small, like $4 million round of funding, which helped us accelerate the demise of the services business. Uh-huh. So we killed that. It took a year to kill that off. And so by the end of 2015, going into 2016, the business started to accelerate. And then when it really started to take off was in 2017.
Yeah. So how do you describe what distinguishes Logikcull? What's unique about Logikcull? What's your sort of value proposition for why Logikcull is the product that somebody should use over whatever else is out there on the market?
Well, there's a lot of legacy products in the market for discovery purposes. So let's talk about those first.
Relativity.
Yeah, Relativity. I mean, so Relativity is a good product, good company for a specific type of discovery use case, usually like the large, complex cases.
Yeah.
But in reality, if you look at the number of cases out there that need discovery, which almost every case does these days, even divorce matters. Sure. You got to sift through people's email.
Yeah.
They're not complicated.
Yeah.
And they're not large amounts of data when you compare it to these Enron-like cases or WorldCom-like cases when you're dealing with terabytes or maybe petabytes of data. The vast majority of them, we think it's around 98% based on the data that we have. 98% of all matters in Logikcull are less than 100 gigabytes of data. Yeah. That's not a lot of data.
Right.
So the legacy tools are not able to keep up with the shift to the cloud. Right? They just can't. They can't handle even a 5 gigabyte matter or 10 gigabyte matter. It's too slow. It's too clunky. Too complicated. So where's Logikcull compared against those? It's super easy to use. Like, our mission is to democratize discovery, so that anybody can do this. Yeah. Like that's it. So it has to be easy to use. It has to be super fast, and it has to be affordable. And a lot of the discovery products and services in the past have just been outrageously expensive. Even today, even the new cloud players, do you know how much a terabyte of data will cost you with one of the cloud companies today to host?
How much?
$30,000 a month.
Really?
How much does a terabyte of data cost you for Dropbox? Or a hard drive on Amazon?
Like
it's like $40. The margin on storage is just crazy, but that's how unfortunately the market works.
Yeah.
And it puts customers
So how do
in a
you
really
address
bad
that?
part.
You're doing a flat fee, single price?
Yeah, per matter pricing, flat fee, and a small one-time data processing fee.
Yeah.
That's just continuing to drop to the floor.
Yeah. So how does that help you democratize discovery? I mean, what does that mean? Do you reach? Are you better for smaller, mid-sized firms, perhaps, or for other types of players in the market that aren't the big corporate e-discovery cases?
We don't look at it in terms of the customer size because. So have we democratized discovery? I think you can look at our customer base. We have some of the smallest customers in the world. Individuals, solo practitioners. We've had judges use this.
Really?
To the largest company in the world, Walmart.
Yeah.
They have a global deployment of Logikcull. And then in between there, we've got state and local government. Your own city of Boston is a big customer of ours. Out here in San Francisco, big tech companies like Lyft, shipping companies like Maersk, they use it. And hundreds, obviously more, lots of law firms in various sizes, AM Law 100 firms too. But what they're using it for is the simplicity of their matter docket, right? So like if they have a lot of matters that are a good fit for Logikcull, then they're just going to want to use that. If they happen to have these gargantuan cases and that's all they do, then it's probably not a good fit.
Yeah.
But we do have customers that have gargantuan cases.
Yeah.
Terabytes of data in one case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that's interesting to me about Logikcull, and I think other e-discovery providers are doing this to some extent, but you're reaching out into kinds of different audiences of users. You mentioned the city of Boston. I mean, it seemed, from what I can tell, from having talked to you about this before and from looking at your website, there are now a number of government entities that are using Logikcull for FOIA management.
That's right.
Yeah, it just makes so much sense to me, but I don't know why that never happened before. I actually, in my day job, I work with newspapers, and I think we've talked about this before. And dealing with public records issues is something I am well familiar with, and well familiar with getting the sort of standard response from a government that it's going to take us forever to get you this response to this information request because we have to send somebody down into the basement to go through boxes of stuff and then redact it all with their magic marker or something. How did you get into that area? How did you get into the FOIA stuff?
Oh, that's a good question. I had no idea this thing existed until around 2014. We hosted a meetup in Washington, D.C. of various government agencies and our because we founded the company in D.C. We're now in San Francisco. And one of the people that joined was David Zavignac, who was a GC for the D.C. Council, right, the Washington, D.C. Council. And we did a demo. We hosted the event and said, hey, let us show you the technology we're building while we're building it. And he came up to us afterwards and said, this would be really great for FOIA work. And we say, what is FOIA? I've never heard this word before. And he tells us all about it. I'm like, all right, well, why don't you try it out? So we gave him a free account, and lo and behold, it was a massive time savings for him. Then that led to the city of Baltimore. And that city of Baltimore was our first customer. And the primary use case was FOIA. And so we did some fact finding there. And we found out that the average time it would take to complete a FOIA response, to your earlier point about going into the basement, was 3 weeks. Well, why is that? Well, no joke. Like, they were pulling documents out, putting them onto a computer, looking at them one by one. If they found something that needed to be redacted, it was printed and hand redacted.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But that's how they did it.
That's what they're still doing. I can tell you they're still doing that all
Cambridge,
over the place.
Massachusetts, by the way, you need to call them and let them know what's up. Because I had a call with them 2 years ago, and that's exactly what they were doing. I said, the city of Boston's doing a little bit better job than you. Don't you want to be with the modern times? But anyway, so post Logikcull at the city of Baltimore, it went from 3 weeks to within 2 hours. Now they routinely do them within about an hour. So massive time savings. And so once we learned about that, we're like, who else has these problems? And it turns out pretty much every state and local government, any public organization like the University of California public school system, the Antioch School District out in where I live, and obviously the federal government has a backlog of these things. The EPA has hundreds of thousands of these FOIA requests, and it's taking them forever to get through.
Yeah, that's great. And even journalists are using you.
Yep.
I think you told me you just got off a call with a New York Times reporter just as we were coming into this interview.
Yeah, Eric Lipton. Yeah, he's.
And there was an article last year in the New York Times that specifically mentioned you as one of the cool tools that a particular reporter at the Times was using.
Yeah, well, I mean, the problem is still the same. Like we're in this. Being in the Bay Area, it's kind of you're in this bubble of the future, right?
Yeah.
But the rest of the world hasn't come up to this future yet. But we're in this digital revolution, and now everybody has to sift through all this data because this noise to signal ratio is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the government doesn't make it any easier. So like in the case of FOIA, you've probably seen this, where they do this data dump, this unsearchable mess of information, and they're like, good luck.
Yeah, they either give you too little or too much.
That's right. Yeah. Exactly. So that's what was happening with Eric at the New York Times, where they would give him these massive PDFs that combined a bunch of documents together, and they weren't searchable. So he would open up these PDFs on his laptop over the weekend to run OCR, and then he wouldn't touch his laptop because it was just chewing through OCR, trying to make these things searchable. Yeah. This is madness.
Yeah.
So I saw him on Twitter talking about this, and I said, hey, I think we can help you out. And then he signed up for the service, loaded in these documents that got into Logikcull, that he was doing an investigation into Scott Pruitt at the EPA. And within a matter of minutes, he had access to a highly searchable database that he could actually manage.
Yeah.
To save him days and days of time.
We'll get back to my interview in just a moment. But first, let's take a break to hear from the sponsors who generously support LawNext. And now, let's continue this week's interview. So, as you sit here today, what are the things you still need to be working on? What are you doing? What are your goals for moving Logikcull forward over the next couple of years? What are the sort of the specific task items you've assigned for yourself in the company to make the product better or bigger or whatever?
Yeah. So at a super zoomed out level, there's really just two objectives. Number one is create a world-class employee experience to help create a world-class customer experience so that your customers become your best salespeople because they love your product, right? Doing that is much harder, easier said than done, right? So for us, it's more of the same. It's just continuing to fix the issues that we find with our own product, with the customers. We prioritize things in terms of speed and ease of use and then features. So, we can't, to democratize discovery, you have to have this super simple product. So we're constantly pulling things away. Like, how can we remove friction from this process? Because at the end of the day, like, all we're doing is enabling people to move data from point A to point B. Right. And we're in the middle. So we're kind of in the way. Yeah. Sender and receiver, it's kind of like data logistics in some way. So whatever we can do to get that information through Logikcull faster is a good thing, which also means enabling people to get access to the product very quickly, which today there's like 100 steps you have to go through before you can actually start searching your data. We want to get that down to one step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your assessment of kind of the state of the e-discovery industry broadly, not just Logikcull, but it's an industry that has evolved a lot in some ways and not in some other ways, probably in the years that you've been in it. But certainly, I think it's probably fair to say that relativity still kind of dominates the market in a lot of ways. But even it's moving to the cloud now. We just saw the Catalyst get acquired by OpenText. Where do you see this industry going over the next couple of years? What do you think might change or not?
The cloud has the the cloud disintermediates the market in a bunch of ways. And so the cloud, if you, as an example, like when a business deploys Logikcull, a bunch of things happen. One, they no longer ship all this data out to various third parties, which could be law firms. It could be e-discovery vendors, because they don't need to. They just put it into Logikcull. And then they use our technology to cull the data as much as they possibly can, because that noise to signal ratio is only increasing. As an example, we did a case study with Walmart. Now, routinely, every case they put in Logikcull, they're reducing the data volume by 98% before documents are reviewed. So nobody's looking at these, searching and filtering and calling. I think that's only going to continue, where more and more businesses will start to take control of the discovery process, and bringing in these various law firms that are more, I wouldn't say modern, but they understand how to leverage these new tools. Not like relativity is not a new tool, or summation or concordances aren't new tools, but leverage these new tools that enable you to go faster, right? Without sacrificing quality. So that's the big challenge with discovery. You can go as fast as you want, but be careful. You want to actually produce a bunch of privileged documents, as an example. That's bad. So I think that trend is, I think that's going to happen. And because that's really only enabled through the cloud, a lot of the legacy discovery players, and you already see this happening, they're starting to consolidate, because that's how they see themselves as competing. We need to be bigger, so that we can survive. Like Epic DTI is an example that's gobbling up all these regional players. So there's that. It's also an opportunity to grow the market. So for us, as an example, in the past, like these small law firms couldn't do this. They'd have to rely on third parties, and it would cost a fortune. Now they can do it themselves, and maybe they even eat the cost internally and don't even bill it back to their clients. It becomes a cost doing business.
What's the end game for Logikcull? Is there one that you have in mind? What's the long-term plan?
Well, I don't think there's, I've been going on this for 15 years, Bob. So I don't look at it in terms of end game. I think the great thing about business, and especially in this space, is that there really is no end game. There are some goals, there's some milestones that we want to achieve. So as an example, we think this market is big enough to support a publicly traded company. The challenge, though, in becoming a publicly traded company in this space is predictability. You have to have predictability in your business model in order to report earnings, as an example. And I think a lot of companies in the past, due to the volatility of data volumes, which is where you make a lot of your money on, and case-driven revenue, where if you have these massive cases and that represents 30, 40% of your revenue, well, what happens when those cases settle? Your revenue goes out the door. It's been really hard for them to go public. It's why you haven't seen e-discovery companies on the New York Stock Exchange. I think that's going to change. So that is one of our long-term goals.
Just to go public?
To go public. We think the best companies are publicly traded companies. And it's hard to do that, but the market's big enough. You have to solve for predictability, in your business model, which we have. And so that's one. And then if we do that, then that's just a fundraising event. Then there's other things that we want to do in terms of building new products and making our existing product even better.
We are just about out of time, but let me give you the final word. Anything else you'd like to say before we conclude?
Try it out. It's the software's free.
You get the pitch in, right?
Well, look, like that's the other thing. Like, if you like this software, then you pay for it. But it is literally free. You can sign up for Logikcull today, and it comes with sample data. You can knock yourself out and search through the JFK data or the Bin Laden data or the Mueller report. Once that comes out, we'll put that in there. Okay. It's not just Enron data. And if it's something you want to try out, you can do that, and it's consumption-based pricing model. So unlike the relativities of the world or vendors, it's very affordable, and you don't have to commit to a long-term subscription price. So that's how you democratize it.
Sounds good. Well, thank you very much, Andy. It's been a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And this is Bob Ambrogi. We've been talking with Andy Wilson, the co-founder and CEO of Logikcull. And you've been listening to LawNext. Until next time, thanks for listening.